Right, should be all live. Day 14 of the war, stream 14. And yeah, 2 weeks in. Pretty crazy. Welcome Pollock, Vlatka, Cesar, the Debt Poker Club, Alex, Katie, Ari, Liam. Welcome everyone. Still can't get access to our... We are logged in. We should be logged in, but we don't have access to the satellite map. It is what it is. And yeah, I'm definitely starting to flag, I think. It's just so much going on constantly. It's difficult to process. Welcome Lewis, welcome Paper, welcome Mayor, welcome Kevin as well. So yeah, day 14, stream 14, and for the first time I feel like I'm flagging. Let us know in the chat if you've got any aircraft. Oh, Forte 10 is back up in the air. Let's see if we can... Oh, we can't get some 3D view. Can we actually? What's it going to come up as in 3D? Is it just going to be empty? Well, this is the view that Forte 10 has. It's just not what it looks like. That would be a very big drone. Forte 10 we saw on day 1. Welcome George, P. Hat, Garth, Alex. It's just a lot is changing, and there's a kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but a bit like you have all these overlapping lines here. There's some people are thinking about NATO for the first time. Some people are thinking about Article 5. Some people are thinking about Putin's motives. We've kind of thought about those things for a long time. Some things are new. Some things keep coming around, like the Polish jets. So it's... I don't know how to explain it, but it's like there's just so many strands now. There's just so many strands happening, and it's all overlapping, and different places are talking about it at different rates, etc. Okay, to think of break hotel must be exhausting. I maybe, don't know. Welcome Alison. Welcome Nicholas. Welcome Lee. Hopefully the stream is good. We dropped a few frames at the beginning. Sean, when does the Vice President land in Warsaw? I have no idea, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's like, so Cesar, it's like, yeah, I can't explain it. It's just, everything is just so there's so many different layers of things we talked about, and it's difficult because new people come into the stream as they always do, and we have to, kind of go through them again, and and every day there's more new things happening. So it's just laying on top and top and top and top and top of each other. Welcome Ethan. Welcome Kev. Welcome Dwight. Welcome TB Land. Yeah, like the Polish MiG situation seems to be that it was quite a, I don't want to say shrewd, but Poland just called the United States out on it, I think. And said if you're behind this, and you deliver them. So it's definitely a fracture that's appearing. Definitely a fracture that's appearing. Can't see any tankers up in the air at the moment. Yeah, not tenable, or didn't seem to be a rationale behind it with the phrases that I heard. Here we go, here's a tanker. Are the Italians up in the air? Yes, they are. Let's dive on board with the Italian and we'll see if we can see that US Air Force plane. This is the Italian tanker. Fauci, get you booster shots. Welcome, Dr. Fauci. Says, what have been the headlines past 24 hours? Obviously, devastating shelling today in Mariupol. It's just been the big news, I think. Welcome, Matthew. Search and destroy global inflation could be the biggest casualty of this war. TB-Land thought on the US not helping Ukraine get jets from Poland. Well, there was an address from Zelensky, I think, this evening where he said, guys, just work out the technicalities. And ultimately, I can see the point. Russia's still going to not like it. So I'm actually astonished that the general will seems to be there and it hasn't happened yet. It seems very uncoordinated. Yeah, the power was cut to Chernobyl at some point. A lot of people worried about that, but all these power plants have, all these nuclear power plants have diesel generator backups. And there were no live reactors at Chernobyl, I think, so it was all in the process of being decommissioned anyway. Creative, I don't blame Poland. Imagine a Ukrainian pilot attack Russian troops from Poland airspace. Yeah. Shrewd realpolitik from Poland, perhaps. I'm surprised the United States didn't just say publicly we'll assist with this, but we need to work out the details. Instead, it seemed to be a bit of diplomacy in public, diplomacy by Twitter. And even if you watch Zelensky's speech about it, he says he's been reading this and that on the media. Can they just sort it out, please? Welcome, Rory. What's the latest? 14 days in, Rory. 14 days in to this war, and I can't describe it in a sentence, I'm afraid. Pollock, a Shitore, don't clip that, is a German layer cake. It has 20 layers and each one makes a cake, but individually they're nothing but a weird pancake. Maybe that's kind of the feeling. Welcome, Fighter Smurf. Welcome, Otto. Welcome, Garth. Thomas in the house. Lewis, as much as no one here wants World War III, I feel this will be a lot worse the longer it's left. Katie, have you thought about setting an agenda for the streams where certain topics to discuss events of the day? Reduce streams frequented? Yeah, I need to think about it. I think I just feel like particularly fatigued today. I've been out and about and stuff, so. Jay says all talk per usual. Do you mean in terms of the planes? George says a very large amount of spent fuel at Chernobyl. I think that is true, but I think I saw like 20,000 units or something. But it can't be at as high a tolerance as a active nuclear power plant, I would imagine, but I may be completely wrong. I remember at Fukushima, the issue was that the earthquake happened, the reactors shut down, just fine, and then I think the power went, and then because of the tsunami flooded the generators, and then there was no cooling, and some of the reactors boiled away all the water, and then they went into meltdowns. I think the meltdown at Chernobyl is now in at least one sarcophagus. There might actually be 2 sarcophaguses. Anyway, I think Chernobyl is... If I titled this stream like... Chernobyl disaster question mark, and I had that big mushroom cloud, it would get a lot of interest for that. But I think that's possibly why it always makes the news. I'm just not sure how. Not sure how bad it actually was. Here we go. Here's Chernobyl. Right on the border, by the way. So I wonder how Belarus feel about all of that. Yeah, I saw the Starstreak missile. Again, looks like the UK MOD are happy providing that because it's still a anti-weapon, so it's still a defensive weapon. I think that's some of the concern about the planes, is that the planes are not purely defensive weapons. There we go. There's the US tanker, by the way. We can actually go there, I think. Go to aircraft. So this is a US tanker, and that is the Italian tanker. Somewhere over there. It's pretty cool. Somewhere around here, you imagine there might be fighter aircraft. Love wins. If you're at that restart point, would you telling us what's happening now? Many of us have just arrived here. So we're in day 14 of the war. So welcome everyone. 268 people watching. So I'll try and do a recap then. So it's day 14 of the war. We've been streaming on this channel every day of the war. Sometimes streaming all the way through the night till dawn. Sometimes doing a few hours here and there in the evening. But every day we've been streaming, so we've been following it. Day 1, there was a shock of the invasion starting. Really, really, really intense fog of war. Wasn't really clear what was going on. I think day 2 we saw the... I think day 2, maybe day 2 or 3, saw the advancements of Russian troops down this boulevard into Kyiv. And we were watching from webcams around here. Near the Independence Square. And you could hear the fighting get close, and it was a really disturbing time. Sorry, first, day 1 there was a very important battle at this airport here, Hostomel Airport, where the AN-225 was in that bunker. Was in that hangar. It's been destroyed. We've seen images of, or videos of the paratrooper assault through low-flying helicopters. Seem to be about at least 20 or 30 helicopters involved. But this site here, there are videos of the aftermath of fighting, and it just looks like an absolute war zone. And you'll have heard about a lot of fighting in Irpin. So it seems like the Ukrainians are really digging in around this northwest side of Kyiv, and have done so really for the last 2 weeks. I imagine they're digging trenches and blowing up bridges and everything like that to make it impossible for the Russian armour columns to progress. This is where you'll have heard about the 40-mile column or whatever. It'll be on these roads. Understanding in the north of Ukraine, it's much more swampy, so and boggy. So tanks can't go off road; they'll just get stuck. So they're limited to the roads. And we've gradually seen in a lot of territory maps. This is just one of them. The Russians gradually kind of trying to rotate around the west of Kyiv. Very early on in the war, we had the Russians surrounding Chernihiv, Konotop, Sumy. Kharkiv, Kherson, Melitopol, Mariupol, and also in Luhansk and Donetsk. Not in Odessa, and not in Dnipro. So a lot of these cities that I've mentioned have been besieged since about day 2 or 3 of the war. So they've been besieged for almost a couple of weeks. And the only cities that I understand have been, inverted commas, overtaken are Kherson, where the Russian commander met with the local mayor, and the local mayor kind of agreed to try and get the Ukrainians to lay down arms. I think the threat was otherwise the city would be, increasingly shelled. Melitopol was a town that was disputed quite early on. Doesn't seem to be clear what's going on there. And Mariupol is this city here on the coast of the Black Sea where you've seen a lot of horrific footage about hospitals being shelled, etc. Water, gas, electricity seems to be cut off here for a long time. The Russian strategy seems to be to establish this kind of land corridor to Crimea, and gradually kind of secure that and then move west to Odessa. I haven't seen any fighting in Odessa in these 2 weeks. Also seems to be that the Russians want to link up their kind of northern front here and their southern front. The extent to which that has happened, I don't know. Something that we found was very important in this war is that the bridging or the ability for the Russians to launch their invasion through Belarus really has changed the face of this war. It was so incredibly important to this war. It is surprising that Belarus wasn't just automatically attached to the sanctions, because you'd imagine Belarus is easier to prize away from Russia. Their president seems to be a bit of an interesting character. I think he's been in power for about 22 years. He appeared to leak the Russian invasion plans by having them on a whiteboard and pointing to them to his generals, which is very weird. But the fact that the Russian troops and the armed columns could progress from Belarus meant they could really get to Kyiv within 2 days. And then there's question marks about what was the actual rationale of that incursion into Kyiv on day 2. Perhaps it was a low percentage chance to try and capture or eliminate the Ukrainian president. Or perhaps it was a miscommunication. Or perhaps it was just to show that they could and put the city on high alert since then. We don't know. But yeah, the fact that the Russians could advance from Belarus has been an absolute game changer. Otherwise, the Ukrainians would have been able to present a much more kind of traditional front here. Part of the reason why it looks like the Russians haven't been able to capture the cities as easily as they might have hoped is that they may have been expecting the Ukrainian population to be more welcoming to them, and it looks like that really isn't the case, even in the east, even in cities like Kharkiv that are very close to the Russian border. So Russia is having to change its tactics. Now we're seeing more shelling and more kind of indiscriminate damage caused to these cities and civilians. Question marks about to what extent Russia really is not achieving its objectives in this war. It might just be a different approach. The Western approach in operations in the Middle East was very much established air superiority, air supremacy very early on, and cautiously advance troops under air cover to try and really minimize casualties. Russia's approach has almost been the opposite. They've ploughed on, even though they still seems to not have air superiority in a number of areas in Ukraine, which is very surprising. It's one thing I called wrong on day one. I didn't see how the Ukrainians would be able to prevent Russia establishing air superiority through the use of Russian cruise missiles, etc. But that hasn't happened for whatever reason. The Ukrainian Air Force seems to be still operating both fixed wing and helicopters as well. And that kind of brings us to where we are on day 14. A slow advance by the Russians. They now seem to be encircling cities and moving on to Kyiv. So they're not kind of waiting to take over those cities. I saw in the news today that the Russians acknowledged that conscripts have been used. Obviously, there's been lots of interviews of Russian prisoners of war where a lot of time they say they're conscripts from the Far Eastern Russia. They didn't know what was going on. They thought it was a training exercise. They'd only been out in this region of Russia for a couple of weeks. Whether that's a Russian approach to kind of send their cheaper kind of military vehicles and less experienced troops against the brunt of the Ukrainian defense, try and wear them down, and now they're going to bring in their more advanced weaponry. I don't know. That's something that's being discussed. And that's pretty much where we are. On the no-fly zone, it's a big topic. I said on day one, I reckon there was a window to enforce a no-fly zone, and that window would have been before the invasion. Ukraine could have requested a no-fly zone be enforced by NATO. That would have been very controversial, but given the intelligence we had from NATO about how this invasion was going to happen, it almost seems that NATO could have played that card. But they didn't, and now it seems pretty impossible to enforce a no-fly zone because it would almost inevitably involve NATO shooting down Russian aircraft, which could lead to retaliation and then a possible Article 5 situation where NATO has a decision to make about whether to essentially start World War III Russia. So that's kind of where we've been. Might clip that. Nicholas says they haven't really encircled Sumy and some of the other northern cities. That's why counterattacks are convoys. Good point, I guess. These maps aren't entirely accurate. I would say a lot of the maps do really show encircling. But yes, you are right. A lot of the convoys around there have been destroyed, and there's video evidence of that. Yeah, anyone talking about all this biolab stuff, I've never found some elements, and there's propaganda on all sides, but I've never found some elements of Russian propaganda that particularly convincing. And but it is still surprising how much propaganda can cut through, and how it can spread. Welcome, Dynamic Warrior. Let us know about your map if you want. Hopefully the stream is working okay. I think we're dropping a few frames. I'm just going to lower the quality a little bit. Bear with me. You won't see a difference because we're not gaming. UMAP, okay. Fauci, how many countries other than Ukraine have severed diplomatic relations with Russia? I don't know, to be honest. I don't know in terms of the expulsion of diplomats, etc. The most important thing, I think, is that the Ukrainians and the Russians do have a negotiation channel. They've met, I think, 3 times now. And the conditions are becoming clearer. Charlie says, awful take in capitals. Victor, US Congress admitted having over 30 of the in Ukraine. Plugging your ears and saying propaganda doesn't make it any less true. Travisa says propaganda on both sides. Truth is the first casualty for all. You've heard that quote a lot. We spoke a lot about this yesterday on the stream. I find it some people are inherently more cynical than other people. And being cynical is not a good or bad trait. You know, some people are cynical, some people are not cynical. Being cynical might mean that you apply more scrutiny. But the Russians really know how to provide food to people that are really cynical about everything. Goffles, you heard about Chernobyl? Do you mean the power cut? I don't think there's any danger of everything going wrong at Chernobyl. Even the International Energy Association have said the same. Levity, why discussing a failed and lost nation? Which nation is that? Yes, Captain Polish. City, are the thin lines of Russian territory at the top of the map all the major roads in the north of Ukraine? Do you mean in this map here? They looked to me. I think the map we had before was better because we had a satellite map that unfortunately we can't get today. It's not working. Oh, mods are out. Mods are just mods have had air superiority in this stream since day one. Right. Get the old satellite map up. So I think these are this map seems to be more accurate. You can see that these territory grains are indicated along these roads. To what extent territory is really controlled, I think is a difficult thing to say. You don't leave soldiers in every square kilometre and say, yes, we control it. There'll be a lot of areas that aren't really controlled by either. And ultimately, if Ukrainians can take their portable man pads and take out armour columns from the side, if the armour columns are exposed, then... But it's a good indication. I think the most important point out of it is that because of the territory, at least in northern Ukraine, the armour columns really are limited to the roads. Pretty much, it seems. Don't know if anyone's seen any tanks that have not been on roads. Dylan, how do you stay sane? Oh, it's not as intense as sim racing, is it? Yeah, so I saw the Chernobyl story break this morning, and I think so. When, because we were following this on day one when we saw the tanks rolling into Chernobyl, and I was surprised there wasn't more of a orderly handover, given that there would have been a lot of international scientists at Chernobyl. The US actually issued a statement on that day saying that some of their scientists were being held hostage. I didn't see any how that was resolved. Seems to be that there's no supply of personnel from the town where the staff at Chernobyl live. Which I'm not exactly sure where it is. Can't see on this map. But it doesn't seem to be any rotation of staff. And so people have to work in quite intense shifts, and that obviously puts the whole situation in danger. Chernobyl is a decommissioned power plant, but to maintain that decommissioning, it does need a lot of work to be done. It's very, very, very expensive. I think it runs into the billions per year. I think what is arguably a lot more shocking was what happened at the active power plant down here, where there was fighting in and around the power plant and shelling. We can have a look at the reactors here. Bear with me. I can find it. Yeah, so fighting in and around here, and here are the reactor buildings. Because these are some of these, well, various states of operation. Welcome, Gil. Joaquin, this chat went from some decent discussion on what is going on in Ukraine to being completely taken over by pro-Putin comments. There's nothing wrong with people providing that point of view, but I think it's always interesting to see when people do have consistently certain opinions. Well, it says maintaining Chernobyl is more complicated than maintaining a nuclear power plant. You're saying this one also has a lot of spent fuel. City will, it's pretty forested and terrain maps. The tanks aren't going to go through it like it's Desert Storm. Yeah, just trying to make the point that even though you may look at a map like this and think, oh, this is just easy territory, you know, I understand the Russians, obviously have to progress armor console along the road, but also a lot of their logistics is based along the railways, which is something that may not be immediately apparent. Says I'm saying 121 Russian airplanes shot down. This is unsustainable even for Russia. I understand Russia has, you know, over 1,000 fighter aircraft though, or sorry, military aircraft. I'm not sure how much that is, you know, tankers, logistics, and how much it is fighters and bombers. So it depends how much they want to deploy. Brian shouts, why you blocked Dirt Dude? I haven't blocked anyone, Brian. My mouse is here. He knew what he's talking about. But the fact you're shouting is, you don't need to shout. It's okay. But the mods are going to be busy tonight. I can feel it. Pollock, a nuclear power plant has a contained reactor that behaves in the expected way. Chernobyl does not have this. A short time running out of diesel will be a catastrophe. I just understand that the spent fuel isn't as close to reaching meltdown as spent fuel in a active power plant, is what I understand, but I may be wrong. Fighter Smith, the problem with the opposite view is that you can't win this. Physically impossible. The opposite side just makes up stuff, and you have to spend a multiple of energies to much stuff. This is exactly what I talked about at the beginning of the stream yesterday. For anyone that was in the stream yesterday, this is exactly what I talked about in terms of, you know, there are not always two sides. Some things should, if you have morals, some things are morally wrong. A children's hospital getting shelled should be wrong. There is no other side to that story. That is wrong. And if you don't think that's wrong, then you're probably immoral. So yes, this space is a space for everyone to discuss, and we have been proudly a kind of neutral space, and people speaking from both opinions, but there are some things that have to be morally wrong. Welcome, Marwin. Bill, no, it depends. Welcome, Bill. No, it depends how many are operational. Russian Air Force availability is very low compared to Western powers. They have lots of planes that aren't necessarily fit to fly, or they're old systems. Victor, I love how people think our government isn't just as evil as the Russian government. Charlie, imagine defending Pentagon propaganda. Don't know what the Pentagon propaganda is. Susan, your voice and demeanour is so soothing in the voice of reason. Not sure it's the voice of reason, it's just a voice, but appreciated. Ray saying spam will not be tolerated in this chat. Very strong statement there from Ray. I like it. Welcome, Daniel. Bill, mods, the Russian MOD is using biolabs as a Saddam's WND argument. Ban anyone who's promoting the idea of these biolabs. I've actually been surprised we haven't had so much of it up till now. Other tin meats are available. Spam, I actually do, I quite like spam actually. The meat variety, I think it's like 93% meat. I don't know what the other 7% is. Jason, it's wrong to take a firing position from such a building if the Russian claims are true. Still a bit excessive of neutralise in such a manner. Suddenly Article 5 has just been invoked against spam. Alex, if you shell a civilian area, it is morally wrong. If you shell a civilian area which is also being used to station military targets, is that morally wrong? You're blurring the lines, but to shell a children's hospital would be morally wrong. Ocean, did you see the BBC News video where the father lived in Russia and his son was in Ukraine? The father didn't believe Ukraine was being bombed, even when his son informed him. I don't know, but again, I don't know if that story is truly representative. You know, there will be people in the United Kingdom who don't know that Russia are invading Ukraine. There will be people in the United Kingdom who don't know that Russia's invading Ukraine, and that's fine. I don't have anything against spam, Mark Scott. I quite like a grilled spam sandwich. Welcome, Brian. A lot of spam chat. Reminds me of primary school where they would force you to eat a battered spam fritter. What kind of school did you go to? Alexander says it's an empty hospital in a city under siege. Scrapman Dan says, I very much doubt that. It's big news in the UK. I can guarantee you there will be some people in the UK who do not know that Russia has invaded Ukraine. I can't guarantee it, but Ven says, I had a co-worker today who had no idea about Russia invading Ukraine and she's from Poland. How does one not keep up with current affairs? You've got to remember we are in a bubble here. Ironically, whether you are very pro-Russia or you are very pro-Ukraine or very pro-inverted commas the West, one value that is shared between everyone there is that you are interested in world politics and world geopolitics and international relations. And a lot of people are really not. So we are definitely in a bubble here. City, what if I told you pepperoni was 130% meat? Is that because it is reduced or something? Ren, if there's military in hospitals, the patients become hostages regardless of which side does it, and killing hostages should be avoided as much as possible. Declan, empty hospital is lies. There are at least 17 confirmed casualties and children still stuck in the rubble. Multiple media have confirmed this. Katie loves this bubble. Power is knowledge. Yeah. But this is this thing about... I don't know how to... I'm not clever enough to explain this, but there's a balloon here. Can we follow the balloon? I'm not clever enough to explain this, but... No, I don't think I can. I don't think I have... I'm able to articulate it. If you accept there are morals, so irrespective of laws, irrespective of the reality of what you can and can't do, if you accept there are morals, and some things are good things and some things are bad things, then there is not always two sides for every story. Some things can be good and some things can be bad. And a lot of things are both good and bad. A lot of things are blurred. But ultimately there's a spectrum with two opposite ends. And so if for everything that happens the answer is, oh well, there is another side, let's find it, in some instances all that does is just muddy the waters. Sorry, if you had a kind of a moral certainty, something was morally good or morally bad, hypothetically, for someone to take the opposite side of that, and so if it's morally good and say, well, that's morally bad, is just undermining kind of morality in itself. You know? So, for example, it's okay to say that the West should not have invaded Iraq for those reasons, because the intelligence was flawed. And the intelligence presented to the United Nations was flawed. And also the subsequent occupation of Iraq meant that hundreds of thousands of civilians were displaced, injured or died. It's okay to say that and say what Russia is doing in invading Ukraine and shelling civilians is wrong. So it's okay to say both those things. I'm not clever enough to say this. Disagreeing isn't undermining, but it's possible. I disagree with that. It is possible. And so if you feel like you can disagree with everything, then you ultimately believe that there isn't a truth. There is nothing that can be a 100% objective truth, because you can dispute everything. If I say that this light is blue, you know, you may say, well, it's only blue because of how you perceive the spectrum, the wavelength. And then you're saying, well, actually we can never say a colour is a colour, because it's all subjective in how it's perceived. do we really know it's that colour? And then you just kind of, you can muddy everything. For example, let's say the Earth is round. I don't know why this always comes up. But let's say the Earth is round. Someone could say, well, hang on, have you ever seen the curvature of the Earth? Have you ever been to space? How do you know the Earth is round? And so you undermine a potential truth of the Earth being round. Stanley says, but more of our values are subjective. Which is such a huge question. It's such a huge question. Dave says, flat Earth is now your moment. Or, for example, okay, the Apollo space program, some might say, landed astronauts on the moon. And they planted flags, and they took photos, and they drove little buggies around. Someone else might say, were you on the moon? Did you see that? How do you know those photos can't be faked? And then it erodes that potential truth of, okay, humanity has put men on the moon. And the wider point I'm trying to make is that if you're someone who consistently says, how do you know the Earth is round? How do you know that the Apollo program put men on the moon? Then that is a degree of cynicism that is not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a degree of cynicism. And cynicism is a healthy thing. And when we were hunter-gatherers, you know, the people that are more cynical, you know, maybe more likely to survive. But if there seems to be passionate people that consistently, so for example, a politician in the United States mentions there being biological laboratories in Ukraine. And someone else can say, those laboratories were creating biological weapons. How do you know they weren't? How do you know they weren't? I don't know. It's beyond what is right and what is wrong. It's kind of, I don't know what axis or dimension this is, but I can't explain it. It seems, I don't know. I don't know. Welcome, Cammy. Welcome, Ratislav. Welcome, G. It's kind of, I just don't know how to explain it. As you can tell, you know, I'm personally not a fan of it. But what I personally believe isn't particularly important. But, you know, we spoke about there will be some people in the UK who don't know that Russia has invaded Ukraine. And for those people, because we're in a bubble here, for those people, they might not want to know about what's going on in Ukraine. They don't need that stress. They don't need that anxiety. And they can, you know, get on with their lives. And all the anxiety and stress and concern we've experienced over the last 2 weeks, you could say negative feelings, they won't have experienced. So you could say that's a good thing. On the other side, you have some people that are very interested in, well, what's the other side of the story? And I don't know if there's a point where there isn't two sides to every story. Some things are just bad. I can't explain it. If anyone can explain it, knows what I'm talking about in chat. I have studied social theory. I've studied, you know, Hegel, Kant, Marx, Nietzsche, Fanon, Mills, you know, all these people. And my brain isn't big enough to kind of assimilate all of that and coherently explain it in a YouTube stream to 500 people. Working 420? So yeah, on that point, so some people don't want to know about it, and you may say, well, if you don't know about it, you're missing out on understanding these things and how it may affect you in the future, etc. You know, you might not be surprised that the gas at the pump is higher, etc., or, you know, inflation is coming. And there's, on the other side, there's some people that are so interested and really want to know, and kind of want to know so much that there's biological labs, there must be an explanation for it. They must have been creating weapons. And to a degree it's healthy, but I think to a degree, do those people accept it? To some degree it may be unhealthy. In the same sense, to be totally ignorant of world events to some extreme may be unhealthy, because you may not know how those events are going to help you. Does that make sense? But maybe it's just a spectrum. Whoops, sorry. Sorry, my crane. Maybe it's just a spectrum of how cynical, or how I'll just believe it, whatever. I'm not going to question it. I don't have time or the mental energy on that side to how cynical. No, I do want to question it. I do. Hang on. No, I want to understand why. I want to. Well, what could the other reasons? Just on that spectrum. And if you have people that are too, I don't want to know about it, then if everyone was like that, Western countries wouldn't help Ukraine. But if everyone's like, no, what could be other reasons? Then it gets a bit destructive. Anyway. Mark, but how does knowing what we know help us? It's a very big question. You could argue say that you may understand more what's coming down the down tracks. Cammy, I've never been more convinced that we need a cataclysmic event to focus the collective psyche of the human race away from the trivial tribalism that rampant now. I'm not sure I can advocate a cataclysmic event. So my point from that mass Pete is that you seem to be right on the, if I take you at face value, right on the, there must be another reason. There must be something else. And I don't know if it pains you. I don't know if it, you need to vocalize that. Thomas, shifting burden of proof is an argumentation fallacy. Someone who makes a claim has to provide evidence of their claim. Kathy, the reason they don't do the no-fly zone is so aid and weapons can get into Ukraine. Yes, there is right, wrong, and white, black opposition. All things ask for discernment. I didn't follow that at all, I'm afraid. That's my fault. Daniel, something positive that could come out of this is increased effort to go fossil-free if we survive. Dylan, it's interesting too, as much of what Ukraine is putting out is propaganda. Sure, they really blow up the Russian tank, but they may not show their own loss so easy. I agree. Well, there's a part of our brain that assesses right and wrong. Lots of serial killers have damage to it, so it's obvious right and wrong is, yeah. Sorry if the stream is buffering, by the way. Jim, I think Putin will lose his head soon and start using chemical weapons, which will trigger other countries to step in and everything can escalate quickly. Just let me know if the stream is dropping lots of frames. I'll try and lower it again. But I really don't know why it's so low at the moment. Gee, why are we basing this war on morals? I don't. So that was kind of separate to this war. I'm not sure who's this war seems to be fundamentally driven by realpolitik. Actually, we were not meant for knowledge. Just paper. I want to stop watching the news because I can feel my anxiety is getting worse. I want to know what's going on. You don't need to watch the stream just paper if it's making you anxious, or watch the news if you're not in Ukraine. That's the luxury we have, is that we don't need to be involved with it. Stream all okay? Okay. I'm streaming it now at a laughably low bit rate, but still can't hold it. Manual restart. Patricia says tomorrow both Ukraine. That may have fixed actually. Tomorrow both Ukrainian and Russian ministers of foreign affairs will meet in Turkey. What can Aspen? Check out Vilnius. What's going on over Vilnius? Gary, there has to be a basic level of understanding of facts for everything. Because if you challenged everything, every conversation... Right, chat, I'm going to switch over to different internet. Because... Have a small pause. Hopefully this is going to be a bit more stable. I hope. It's a completely different connection. Jack Wright, in your opinion, what do you think will happen? I really hope there's still a way to de-escalate it, and I do feel like the longer there is what could be called more of a stalemate, then Putin hasn't committed so much that he can still de-escalate, but honestly I don't know. We're in the phase now after the invasion, but kind of before the full besiegement of Kyiv, it feels like. Once Kyiv is being besieged, it's not really a... Ukraine don't really have a negotiating position. So I think it makes it less likely that a settlement be reached. Right, let's be better now. Peanut, why is Ukraine putting out so much propaganda? If you mean in terms of the videos of like Russian losses, then it's morale boosting for the Ukrainians. It kind of is the opposite of morale boosting for any Russians who are watching. So I think it's pretty apparent why. Thanks, Daniel. Let's check out that C-17. Fred, I can't see it. We got it. Let's get that out on the 3D view. This is a Globemaster. Big cargo plane that has taken off from, I imagine, that Polish airport. Does anyone know whether this plane could carry kind of dismantled MiG-29s? Andy, has anyone seen any fighting since this war began? It's a bit of a strange question, Andy. Joshua, do you think given the galvanization of Europe there may be calls for referendum Britain rejoin the EU? I don't think so. And I think we're going to see more fractions starting to appear now. Like the USA went the furthest on the oil ban from Russia. The UK has followed, by phasing out Ben 23. Germany said that it cannot do that because it's so reliant. So there are fractions starting to appear with these jets as well. Brad says it absolutely could be. We do have some military plane experts in the chat. Daniel saying that's the big boy. Yeah, Bill. I think Bill's a military expert. Little inkling. Putin still talks special operation. He can manufacture a reason for that, having been completed in withdrawal, but he will need more than he's achieved so far. Love wins right now. Putin is controlling the world with this threat to go nuclear plus lethal power. Well, I do think that, you know, NATO are very much on the back foot here. They don't want Russia to succeed in this invasion, and now NATO countries are squabbling about how to provide meaningful support in terms of the MiG-29 fighter jets. So there's a famous Napoleon quote, which is, never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake. And I think, you know, Russia is just seeing how this one plays out. Debt Poker Club in Brazil. My family didn't have TVs. My mum's idea. I never have been a TV watcher, but I'm actively following this conflict as I believe it is an historic event bigger than any other I will see in your lifetime. Thanks for sharing that with us, the Debt Poker Club. Sorry, got quite behind the chat. Andy Hay has not seen a single gun fired. Are you from this planet, Andy Hay? Listening, I'm presuming the MiGs will be delivered, they just don't want it done openly. Maybe, I think it's... So what I was speculating yesterday and last few days is that it is a bit of a hot potato, as someone in chat put it. But ultimately, it's happening in the open, so it doesn't matter who provides it. You know, Russia is not going to be happy about it, and you know, they will always have been Polish planes, and the USA will always have been kind of heavily involved, so... Espen, let's hope they get the power back up. Yep, I hope so. Yolanda, welcome back, Yolanda. I tried to watch the news and television this evening, switched it off while saying stop it, it turned around to negative state. Bill, Ukraine will win the war, but it may lose this conventional round of conflict. We may see it progress to that guerrilla phase. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to even foresee or understand how a country like Ukraine could end up in as a, you know, having a guerrilla resistance, but you know, sort of, you'd think it become like Putin's Afghanistan then. You know, heavily armed and supplied by the West and supported by the West. God can say sometimes it's too late to talk about peace. I don't think it's ever too late to talk about peace. Depends on what the objectives are. Right, Russia is such a beautiful country. Such a shame Putin is doing this. Andy, yes, I'm asking a question, not being rude, my friend. I don't think I was being rude either. Maybe I was. I probably was, actually. Sorry about that, Andy. Yeah, I think we've seen the supply planes coming from Turkey that may have these TB2 drones on board that seem to be particularly effective at getting past Russia's anti-air defences. Harry, count yourself lucky that you have never had to pull a trigger on another human on behest of a government. Katie, I'm sure whipping their phone out is a priority and under attack. Feelgooder says the MiGs from Poland not going to happen. Let's put this up as a poll then. Let me put this up as a poll. There we go. Let's see what the chat thinks, and also the people watching not in chat. Appreciate you. Hope you're all well and enjoying the space, or say having a positive effect on you. Oh, I'm on top chat. Okay. And 100 votes in, and it's 58% no at the moment. Welcome, G. Welcome, Rebel. Watu says, Zelensky, please wake up. Your dreams and ambitions affect thousands of children and families. What are his dreams and ambitions, Watu, in your view? Jill saying, agree, Migs will never happen. Well played by Poland. They put USA on the spot. City Snipes, Turkey is an interesting one, as I thought they might be more aligned with Russia. Well, Turkey is a NATO member. Turkey has shot down a Russian plane. So, I've been to Turkey. It's a very interesting place. It's a very cool place, but interesting place. Ever is a long time. That is true. Bill, I don't know. We have to consider all possibilities. I think the urban warfare will be decisive. Hopefully the AT defence causes so much havoc and disarray that it blunts the spearheads. (172) Ellis House, does Ukraine have an airfield ability to get? I understand that they do. I think the US, the Pentagon issued a statement a few days ago saying that the majority of Ukraine's air assets were still operational, which I found very surprising. Welcome, Kim Quit, working and listening to the stream. So I'm trying to keep up the chat. This inkling, if the US are relaying real-time satellite imagery to Ukraine, what do we know about Russia's satellite capability? I don't know. Could they be taken out? We would certainly hear about it if a satellite was taken out, because it would cause so much. Well, if a satellite was taken out conventionally, it would cause so much debris. It would be a kind of separate disaster. That's just my thoughts. Wacky, they could have flown the planes in without Russia knowing about it. I think ultimately these planes at the moment are NATO planes. I imagine they'll have NATO, even though they're, underlying MiG airframes. I imagine they'll have a lot of NATO equipment on them that will need to be stripped. And can you imagine the field day that, the respective departments in Russia would have if they found a NATO plane had been supplied to Ukraine secretly, if and when it had been shot down. Tracer just got in. Do you think the MiGs will be sent? I think they will. There seems to be the will. It's just about technicalities now. So I'm sure, it's this kind of open negotiation. Russia knows about this. So what it's trying to avoid in terms of people say having fingerprints or being too closely associated is not as relevant anymore, because and it would be if these planes are now not supplied and Ukraine inverted commas loses this war, then people will accuse them of having blood in their hands, because they couldn't make this happen for technical reasons. So I think yes, but the vote is very close: 48% yes and 52% no. So if you are watching, do feel free to hit that button if you want, whichever way you feel, or you don't need to if you're not sure. Brad says this conflict will fizzle out and in the coming years more and more countries start trading with Russia. For a lot of things that would be my perspective, for example with the annexation of Crimea and the support of the independence movements in Luhansk and Donetsk, even after the tragedy of MH17, but I feel like this is different and I can't foresee how those sanctions are going to be lifted. Russia is now being put in kind of a North Korea style segregation from the Western economy. Techno, when did Turkey shoot down a Russian plane? During the Syrian civil war? Susan, been to Istanbul and it's one of my favourite places I've ever visited. Anton shouts, I think Poland, Polish flag, giving Ukrainian flag, the fighter jets, is a very dangerous move for NATO and could be viewed by Russia as war. It's a good point, Anton, because they, everything up till now has been, you could say defensive assets, but a plane, even if it is a short-range fighter jet, could still go over the border and be an offensive asset. Mark, what is Putin gaining from all this? Just to land, we've spoken about this a lot. A kind of very powerful desire to restore former Russian glories, perhaps. A very strong belief that Ukraine is Russia, perhaps. Natural resources, perhaps. Genuine concern about the eastern expansion of NATO, perhaps. Bill, but China is also gaining leverage over Putin's region. Now Russia is forced to take hands out of the PRC. I think it's a big blow to national pride. Village, looking at the map, maybe Poland, Romania, Slovakia, etc. would share a border with Russia if Ukraine falls. Maybe better served by defending Ukraine directly. I agree that for the West and for NATO, it is good to have Ukraine in some ways. It's good to have Ukraine as a buffer state. Because at the moment, Article 5 is not in question. Article 5 is not being tested against Russia. And if Russia is able to, occupy Ukraine or install a favourable government, then the de facto border will be with a lot of NATO countries. And there may be the risk of things flaring over from time to time, as happens in contentious borders over the world all the time. So I don't think NATO would actually want Ukraine as a member. And I think one of the major negotiation points that you think is a must-have at this point in time for Putin in terms of Ukraine agreeing to not join NATO is probably one that practically possibly could be achieved. But if you get Ukraine to sign something, say they will not join NATO within a certain time period, then that is infringing on Ukraine's sovereignty to do whatever it wants to do. But as a Chinese delegate in the United Nations Security Council said, in their view, Ukraine has to be a bridge between the East and the West. So Ukraine is in this factual position where, as I've said, if it looks too far west, then it gets pressure from the east, and that pressure might be military. And if it looks too far east, it might get pressure from the west, and that west might be, supporting revolutions, etc. Don't put any language like that in ZSP. Cam says they already have 2 NATO nations touching Russia. The talk about buffer status means I'm not sure. That yes, there's a Kaliningrad here, which I'm not sure if that's what you were thinking about. And then yes, you also have Latvia and Estonia. So you actually have 4 countries bordering Russia there in NATO. And then you have Finland as well, a non-NATO country. But I think the proximity here to Moscow, that's just my view. Someone's saying any submarines missing. Well, I wouldn't know. Jason, I heard that intelligence thinks Russia's next move after Ukraine would be to take this small bit of land connecting a land bridge cutting off Lithuania. I don't know what you mean, but if they want to connect Kaliningrad here, then there is both Lithuanian and Polish territory in the way before it gets to Belarus. Gurkin says, I say no name, no face, no number, no war. Yeah, I don't know if people know. Put ourselves chat. Do people know about the history of Alaska? Just to show how the period after the Second World War in terms of borders was a very unusual time, or relatively. Do people know what the history of Alaska is? So Alaska is a state in the United States. So Russia sold Alaska to the United States about, I'm going to say 170 years ago. I might be wrong. But about 170 years ago, I think, Russia sold Alaska to the United States for, I think, in today's money, about $200 million. Welcome, Ray. Welcome back, Ray. So, in a not too far distant past, this piece of land here was Russian. And I do wonder what that would have meant for international relations. Obviously, it's, you know, not really hospitable, not going to be a major population centre, but 1867. So how far off was I? Some Russian nationalists want Alaska back. Joseph says US bought Alaska in 1967. Wow. The old typo. Sorry that we got the ads on today. $154, okay. And also stuff like, you know, the Louisiana Purchase. So, yeah, the concept of a sovereignty of nations as something that is kind of enforced by the United States, the United Nations. And B, also the concept of like fairly established national borders. I think it's a fairly recent concept. I mean, you have to look at a lot of the lines in countries that are perfectly horizontal along latitude lines because of how they were carved up by, you know, colonial superpowers. And yet after 1945, we've lived in this era where the United Nations does have this legitimacy because most nations are members of trying to uphold and safeguard the sovereignty of nations. It's not a world government. It's about the sovereignty of nations. I wonder if the West will look back and... Again, I don't know. But I wonder if the West will look back and think, perhaps after the fall of the Soviet Union, we moved into this hegemony with the United States as the world's policeman. If the West had been slightly less interventionist, as the United States seemed to have pivoted to when they withdrew very quickly from Afghanistan, then a lot of the force and justification in Putin's speech on the dawn of the war wouldn't exist. Is a piece of sovereignty of nations is an illusion, only big powers can afford it? Most of geography is so important. Vice versa, much more interesting as a concept of unclaimed land. Groove, with Europe slowly moving away from Russian energy and the economy in shambles, how can Putin not already see the sanctions as an attack? He doesn't have much more to lose at the moment. I agree. It's the question is, would Putin have expected this level of sanctions? So if you exist in a political system where you have you are exposed to a lot of criticism. So there's many different political systems around the world. Even in liberal democracy, you have different systems. So, for example, Germany political system is one that the way that votes translate into elected representatives is one that gives more representation in parliament to different parties. The UK and the United States have a very adversarial first past the post way of doing that, which means that you actually don't often get that broad spectrum, but you do have often two very powerful opposing parties that are opposed. So you do have criticism. Now, with United Russia's position in Russia, the extent to which Putin would actually receive that criticism is maybe a little bit under question. And so would he have really been that appraised of the potential level of sanctions that could have been leveraged in response to this invasion? Or is what's happened, was it, unforeseen? Because if it's unforeseen, then perhaps that is dangerous. Matspeed, the West seems very communist now. What a peculiar thing to say. Gary, the US came late to the table. They are not allowed an empire, so they attempted an empire built via corporate bodies rather than governing bodies. So it says Germany is also federalized rather than centralized. Yep. Russia is another country which is a federal state, actually. The Federal Council. Mojo says, I don't think Putin expected sanctions of this degree. Dylan says, ironically, as the peoples within the occupied territories are more Russian-leaning, Russia has greatly decreased the opposition to the current Ukrainian government. I see what you're saying. Ultimately, I think it will just come down to whether there is a government that has any sort of legitimacy. Gee, what's the purpose of the sanctions if Germany is still buying millions of gas from Russia? These sanctions don't hurt Putin, they're hurting Russian people. I agree they don't hurt Putin in a direct sense. The sanctions really seem to be designed to get both public and business pressure on Putin to change his mind about the invasion. But it's a very blunt tool, and it is the ordinary Russian people that will suffer the most. And in the same way in the West, it's kind of ordinary people that will suffer with inflation. And I do think that it is likely that the sanctions will be messaged in Russia as in a way to galvanise the Russian population against the West. Welcome DLC channel. Robert, Russian stuff is designed to be tough. Maintenance is not a priority. It's why they don't even clear off their runways. Griefhole, excellent content. Happy Fun channel. Thank you for asking my question. Keep up, brother. Thanks, Griefhole. Keep on grooving. Alchemy Putin announced that they are looking to nationalise any company that is more than 25% owned by an unfriendly country. I think at this point, the Russian, and again, it's something that we've been following these streams, something that we thought might happen. The Russian economy is really, there is going to be a very, very thick iron curtain back up again. Looks like Russia may just default on its Western debts. Russia may, not even acquire, just nationalise foreign assets, and Russia will essentially rebuild some of the core competencies like payment systems, IT systems, some mixed messaging about Russia's going to cut itself off from the internet. And the question is whether that will be acceptable for the Russian people. Because if you accept, and you may not accept this, but just to put it out there, if you accept that Western liberal democracy in a globalist sense does mean higher living standards for the populations of those Western liberal democracies, notwithstanding that if you have a neocolonialist approach, you may say that it's exploiting, countries in Africa, Central Asia, etc. But if you say that that globalist Western liberal democracy framework is raising living standards for the population in those countries, then Russian population have seen that, and as Russia has also been integrated in that international framework, their living standards have also risen. So if another kind of Iron Curtain comes up in an economic and business sense, and Russia has to, go it alone on a lot of things, big question as to what the role of China and India will be in all of this, then it's not like the Russians don't know what it was like before. It's not a frog in boiling water situation. It's a frog in normal water, and then sloshing a load of boiling water in. Jason, they don't seem to mind they're losing McDonald's. I don't think Putin will mind that at all. Alex, if Russia cuts stuff off the internet, how will core infrastructure continue to function? Microsoft have pulled out, so they'll have to make their own systems, I'd imagine. Student just says, what? So we don't know what that's about, Sonia. John A says Putin is in such a pickle now, he may as well continue to the bitter end until he gets what he wants, i.e. suitable peace treaty, puppet Ukraine, and total annexation. The thing is that because of the segregation that's now occurring economically, in a business sense, and culturally, Putin is able to message this to the Russian people however he wants. So there may be a stuff that we may deem as demonstrably false can still be messaged as the truth. If you have the absolute control over the media. Matsby says all the companies exiting Russia, many are still paying wages for Russians. I think that is a nice thing to do. I don't know if anyone would disagree with that. Would anyone disagree with that? Companies exiting Russia continue to pay their employee salaries? Will be Mac Putin's. Touche. Johnny says, I don't think internet can be stopped always away, but if it's, for example, illegal to access the, inverted commas, Western internet or whatever, then if you are found using it, then that is a deterrent, in the same way that I understand it's now possibly illegal in Russia to refer to what's happening in Ukraine as a war. Yeah, the leased planes, the lessors will be very worried about it, because the lessors may have to default on their mortgages, and also their insurance may not pay out, because if it's due to an act of war or some kind of black swan event, then the lessors are going to be in a really difficult position. So the way it works for a lot of airlines is that you have the airline that we all know and love, maybe not love. They will often lease their aircraft, from a leasing company. So you have these big leasing companies that own a lot of aircraft, and they will lease them. So that's why you don't need so much capital to start an airline, because you just rent the aircraft. And the reason why the leasing companies are able to own so many aircraft is often that they will take mortgages from banks not high street banks, but international commercial banks, and those banks will ultimately have a mortgage on the aircraft. So I imagine what might happen is if the aircraft is seized in Russia, then the airline will be breaching its contract because it won't be able to provide it back to the lessor. The lessor will default on the mortgage because it won't be able to pay the mortgage because it's not receiving their leasing income. And the bank won't be able to go to Russia and with its mortgage document and say, that plane now belongs to me. So don't know if there's any aircraft leasing experts in the chat. Oh, this one's on back home to the UK. Okay. 21 years old, this aircraft apparently. This is an RAF C-17. Phil G says that was my business before. So is that did I get any of that correct, or was it all completely wrong? Let me know, Phil G. So ultimately, everyone in that chain is going to lose out. The airlines are going to lose. Well, I don't know how many non-Russian airlines still have planes in Russia, actually. I don't know. Phil G says, yes, it is correct. Okay, fine. My aircraft leasing knowledge is... I've passed that test. Sean says, what's the point of internet if no Netflix? I see what you've done there. I don't think the insurance companies lose out, because they're just not paying out. So the insurance companies aren't going to lose out. Marty says, I'm currently connected to IT systems in Moscow and have no issue accessing Microsoft Cloud services. Okay, that's interesting to know. Earthix MC says, it is not false. Russia does not owe money to any countries. Phil G says, leasing agents will be insured, but the banks who own aircraft. But will the insurers pay out, given that it's such an unusual circumstance? Stevie Moore says, John A, there were planes out in the North Sea the other night combing the areas for Russian sub. I have some pics. We did see, was it 4012 up here? Elsmere, anyone finding it kind of soothing to just listen to him talk about the whole situation, or to love the accent? Wow. Thank you very much. Levi Wilson, where's the plane going? Looks like it's heading back to... I'm going to get this wrong. It looks like it's heading back to RAF Mildenhall. I bet it's going to go to Bryce Norton now. Kwangbo Chen, how far do you think Putin go in terms of trust uses banned weapons for the West tactical forces? It kind of depends whether he wants to escalate or not. The question is, how far does he feel he needs to go to achieve his objectives and not jeopardize those objectives? Or to boil it down even further, if the Ukrainian resistance continues to be strong, how far did he think he can go and not involve NATO in the war directly? Nigel says, don't forget wars are full of BS tactics. definitely kind of, there is the space right now to think about how this all plays out. John is from the map. You think he wants to annex all of East Ukraine? Again, I don't know what that gets. That's not a. That doesn't get him anything. It doesn't. That doesn't align with any of his logical or any of his purported rationales for invading, though, does it? So it just leaves the question entirely unsettled. At the moment in the poll, by the way, it's 56% no, 369 votes. So if you're watching, you haven't voted, 430 people, do feel free to vote if you want. Do free to hit that like button if you want as well. I don't know how many likes are on, but I don't know if it's possible. Could get to 200 likes possibly. Do you want to say it makes Ukraine economically unviable? EO, who is the admin of the UA website? Are they updating battle lines at all? I think it's a fairly neutral website that has reported on a number of kind of global events before. I have seen Chinese maps. I have seen Russian maps. I have seen Western maps. And depending on which ones you view, there's slightly more red. Nothing drastically different, I would say. Joseph Chat seems to think that the MiGs will not make it to Ukraine. It is close though, isn't it? When he says he's going for more than Ukraine. Groove, Poland isn't risking it without the US also getting involved. It's pretty obvious I get their hesitation. Yeah, they have that is kind of diplomacy in public, right? Over Dresden now. See if we got any other planes that are. Oh, here's the Italian tanker, which is it on the ground? I presume it's on the ground. Yes. It's now under the ground. Just chilling there. Rebel says, honestly, international law is idealistic at this point. When it comes to pure power and real politic amongst major states, the ruler is never going to stand in court, let alone prison. Victoria, welcome Victoria. Sorry, a stupid question. There's no stupid questions here. Heard that some UK soldiers have gone AWOL to possibly fight in Ukraine. If true, do you think this would rule Ukraine toward Russia? It was pretty big news today in the UK about some serving UK soldiers having gone AWOL. The UK Foreign Secretary did speak, I think, last Sunday, about supporting people who wanted to fight in Ukraine. That was jumped on pretty immediately by Lavrov, I think, who said that he used that might be 2 weekends ago, can't remember, said that he used that as a reason to, well, that was part of the reason why Russia was escalating its nuclear deterrent. So that might have been a faux pas. And again, I feel like Moscow and London feel like they're on the opposite ends of a very long string. When someone tugs it in London, it's felt in Moscow. So this thing about UK soldiers going AWOL, I'm pretty sure we'll hear about that from Moscow. John A, is a targeting hospitals really deliberate or just because Russia relies on inaccurate rocket artillery instead of smart weapons? You would think that they wouldn't. There are many reasons why you wouldn't want to shell a hospital. You know it's going to be, in a very glib way, you know at the least it's going to be very bad publicity. So I don't know. Wakamisa? Welcome, David. Tanker. Oh, is this plane moving? Oh, it's taxiing, maybe. Nope. It's moon taxiing now. It's going backwards. It would be cool to see this taxi and follow it. Do we think that's like... It's still got its transponder on. Keep an eye on that still. It would be cool to track it. Do you say tanker over the Black Sea? That would be very surprising. Let us know if you got a registration. They're not registrations actually. They're like the flight numbers. Every UK plane, the registration letter for the UK is G. So every UK plane starts with a G. Stevie says some shocking comms tonight. Brian Dunbar, welcome Brian. If he's having this much trouble resupplying so close to his border, how in the world could he support a force of any respectable size 1,000 miles away from home? I think the idea would be that Ukraine would become home, but I agree. The biggest miscalculation here fundamentally may have been both in a sort of short-term sense, the likelihood of Zelensky to flee or capitulate, which hasn't happened as of yet. In fact, it's come across as the opposite. And also in a much longer sense, the willingness of the Ukrainian civil population to welcome the occupation. And if Putin really has been badly advised on that and is surprised by it and maybe still refuses to believe it, then that is a huge miscalculation. Doesn't mean that they won't succeed in what they want to do, but it is a huge miscalculation. We're seeing some drifting now from this plane, right? Oh, this is exciting, isn't it? This is the Italian tanker that likes to drift. It is the #1 most tracked plane worldwide. Registration Pitbull. And we are going to see it take off. I'm trying to get it low, but it doesn't want to stay low. I don't know if anyone knows if we can get that low. Let's get shadows on. We're running this on an NVIDIA 3080 RTX graphics card with I think 12 gigabytes of video RAM. We've got 32 gigabytes of system RAM and an i5-10600K CPU. So you better believe we're going to put this on high quality and run those shadows. Oops. I knew what I was doing. There we go. Why is it tracked the most? Probably the same reason we're tracking it. It's interesting to watch. Welcome, Faye. Sorry to your unwill. Maybe get better soon. Thanks, Yolanda. Okay, it's a Royal Air Force tanker then above the Black Sea. That's interesting. More transponders on today then. Is that a real plane? Yeah, I believe it is. Well, this is I don't know if the graphics are that good, but this is a representation of what we understand to be happening in the real world right now. Katie only just found out commercial planes can reverse. Very nice. Creative Victor, how do you feel about the current offer of peace in Russia to Ukraine? Do you mean the parameters? The parameters we talked about, I think since day one, what was be likely narrow path to de-escalation, which is recognition of Crimea, recognition of the independent regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, demilitarization, whatever that means, commitment to not join NATO, and I think changing government. That would be a capitulation. The question is, ultimately, for the Ukrainian state, is Is the alternative better? Slow, can you do 4K? Yeah, I screen capture 4K for my racing videos. Laughter Williams is fine. It's a Italian tanker that is right on the Polish border. It's here. This is the airport it's at. So you can see that it's going to taxi down probably R1 at the end of the runway onto B. Johnny, are any Russians currently in the ISS? I would imagine so, to be honest. But I don't know for sure. But I would imagine there are Russians in the ISS. I'd imagine that there's a Soyuz, if there is, there's a Soyuz capsule up there waiting to come back down. Hawaii says Zelensky should capitulate. The alternative is not better. The Americans using Ukraine as a cannon fodder in a larger proxy war with Russia. Kathy says Russia could join NATO. With respect, I think that ship has sailed. Thanks for the news there. Yeah, 2 cosmonauts, Russian people in space, that's a technical term, are cosmonauts, and American people in space are astronauts. Russia refer to the space as cosmos, I believe. I might be wrong on that. Thanks, Stevie. Keep us updated on that. We're just going to track. We're going to go to midnight UK time today, by the way, so we're going to go for another 15 minutes. So its MSN is 33687, and that will be on the insurance documentation and the airworthiness certificate and stuff like that. Maybe Russians should move to their own modern America says. I'm not sure it works like that, but that would be pretty extraordinary, right? One of these things, if there is a wider conflict, then you can imagine the conversations on the ISS are going to be very interesting. So imagine they have a much... Should we go first person for this? Let's go first person for takeoff. Should we go full screen? Bosh. It's happening. Don't keep resetting this. Come on. Okay, we have to go first person. A little bit drifting. We know this Italian pilot, he likes to drift a little bit. We've run out of runway? No, this hasn't loaded. We might already be at 400 feet, by the way. Ground speed 154 knots. Whoa. Aggressive takeoff there, military takeoff. It's that moment where everyone looks out the window and everything's at a bit of an angle. As you climb, for anyone that's been on a plane. For anyone that hasn't been on a plane, can we get in snow? For anyone that hasn't been on a plane, this part is very cool. As things, you can still see stuff clearly. It's not like when you're cruising and everything down there is very small. A lot of banking going on. If the sun's out, the sun will kind of cast interesting shadows inside the plane and whatnot. Yolanda's never been on the plane? If only the graphics were better. Yeah, I don't know, for a browser they're pretty good. refresh the live UA map, we will do that. Mine isn't updating, I'm afraid. There's something a bit wrong with my one because it's not keeping me logged in. Matt, if as part of the deal Ukraine gave up the ESA, wouldn't that remove any need to commit to not joining NATO? They wouldn't be able to join NATO because you can't join NATO, I think, whilst you have a border dispute, and even for some time after a border dispute, if I remember. Matthew, I was 18 before I got on a plane. It was an awesome experience, very nice. Runon, have you ever flown a plane? I have flown a plane, actually. I have flown planes. But only gliders and propeller planes. I've never flown a jet aircraft. Face, this part is very cool if you enjoy flying. I hate every part of it. Fair enough. Adam says, anyone ever been in the combat landing on a C-130? Nice flex, Adam. Grew flew plenty of times and I still get a sense of awe. Still amazes me how far we came. The airplanes are mundane. That's true. Kathy, I think the ISS is pretty close to being end of life now, actually. I think it was extended. Joseph, how can Sub Hunter website know where the subs really are? I've no idea. I actually haven't used that website. David's never flown to 26. Tobias saying helicopter's amazing too. Josh says the ISS crew don't want to get drawn to geopolitics or above all of that. Good joke. Good joke, Touche. See what you've done there. Fair play. Jason, is the Earth flat, bro? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty weird to think that the B-52 was flying in the 1950s, and that pretty much the same airframe is still going. I think the 747 was flown in the 1960s, and obviously it's gone through revisions. I think it's now the 747-800 or something. In fact, I think the last 747 commercial airliners have rolled off the delivery lines at Boeing, if I remember. I may be wrong on that, but I think that's happened. Flying in a 747 is an experience. It certainly doesn't feel the most modern. Yeah, mine was not. There's an issue with my one because I should be logged in. It's not keeping me logged in. You can let us know what the news is. Sorry, I don't know who that was. Phil? Rebel sub-Baltic nations make eastern edges into no man's land. I think a lot of NATO analysts, or sorry, even ex-NATO kind of commanders, midterms are saying that NATO needs to create an eastern front now, a militarized eastern front, and that kind of seems like a sad. If you believe that integration ultimately is a good thing, that seems like a sad, perhaps, reality that we're in. Kathy was born on a cargo plane. Wow. Alex, how would the ISS be affected in the event of MAD? It's interesting because I don't think they would be, definitely not with Soyuz, they'd be able to... Actually, I don't know, maybe it's more like with Soyuz, they'd be able to come back down to Earth. That's a great sci-fi novel or movie, if someone wants to run with it. Mutually assured destruction on Earth. Irradiated planet. US and Russian astronauts and cosmonauts, respectively, have to create food, survive in the ISS until the irradiation levels go down. They then go down in a Soyuz capsule, and they have to kind of... And that's the first movie. Then when they open the hatch, credits sets up the sequel. And then the sequel is like they've got to make contact with the remaining bits of human civilization. So feel free to run with that. Just put me in the credits. Actually, it wasn't even my idea, was it? Whose idea was it? Whose idea was that? Alex Muir. Put both of us in the credits. Isn't that the plot of the original Planet of the Apes? I don't think the ISS was involved in it, though. So we're going to end the stream at midnight. Try not to go past midnight, really, on these streams. UK time, so you can see the time here. Let me refresh. Again, I haven't really refreshed my sources tonight. Looks like PlayStation pulling out of Russia, perhaps. Yeah, I saw in the chat, Lada is halting production. Does anyone have a good name for that movie? Do you see the no call sign in the north? You mean on the map? No more Gran Turismo 7 tonight, Dobbo. I might make a quick video though to go online tomorrow morning. Thanks, thanks everyone in chat. It was a bit weird at the beginning, wasn't it? It was a bit weird at the beginning, but got the best mods in the game. Phil, just tell us what your news is. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time, and then everyone's going to be, what did Phil want to tell us? Says Putin, Russia was pushing 1,000 soldiers and weapons towards Ukraine for a few months, and Putin made it clear what his intentions were. The major Western governments knew it did not intervene. I think that's a little bit debatable. There may have been a lot of arming and training behind the scenes that we weren't aware of. I certainly agree with you in terms of the Western kind of conscience. Even as far back as January, it didn't seem like there was going to be war in Ukraine. Obviously, when the intelligence reports started getting shared publicly, I think that started to change. But we don't know how much was going on in terms of arming and training, etc. Robert says, sadly, after a full strike, there would be nothing left down here, and it would take about 50,000 years for the radiation to dissipate enough to survive on the surface. Maybe this is good news for SpaceX. I don't know, in terms of trying to establish a colony on Mars. See Depot Club. Oh, thanks, Sonia, for the $2.79 coffee donation. Yeah, I'll need it tomorrow morning. Thanks, Sonia, for the Canadian $3 there. Not sure why that didn't come up in the top of my thing, to be honest. Right, 3 minutes to go till we're going to wrap things up. So again, if you do have any other streams that you recommend, this at the top here is Live UA Map. This down here is Flight Radar 24. This is live stream events. If you want to be in this chat, you can be in this chat. Try Air Nav Radar Box. We can try that. In what way is it better? Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Rebel. Another day, 14 days we've been engaged and involved with what's going on. Definitely hearing lots of different points of view on everything, taking it all in. I feel like it's okay to listen to different points of view and make your own decision. Say, well, okay, I've heard different points of view and this is what I believe. Thanks, Rebel. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, 14. I believe this is the 14th stream. I think yesterday was 13th. Yeah, do feel free to hit that like button if you want. If I was saying it a lot, I'm sure we could get to 500 likes on these streams. And yeah, we'll see what week 3 of the war brings. Week 3 of the war. You've got to remember that it is very expensive for Russia to keep supplying, keep the logistic channels and the sanctions going the other way. So the screws are being turned. It's not a situation that can just go on forever. Right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go to our members page, which I think I need to update. Yeah, it's just about midnight here in the UK. Thursday, Friday, tomorrow. It's a couple of days for everyone before we get to the weekend. Hope everyone has a very good evening tonight, what's left of it, wherever you are in the world. And good Thursday and Friday. And then it's the weekend. And it's been another great chat we've had. Just checking on the poll, over 500 votes, and the majority of this chat doesn't think the Polish MiGs will ever make their way to Ukraine. I think they will, but the majority of this chat thinks they won't. That's a great thing about this chat in a nutshell. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.
There was a wild ride, I know at the start you were curious, but my goodness, that was fast and furious. All the intensity we had, we've come to the end, now that's too bad. But the energy threw books off the shelf, and we hope you all enjoyed yourselves. Enjoy yourselves. We will go all the way. It's not about the trend. Keep going now. Keep going till we reach the end. Till we reach the end. If you had a good time being part of this journey, and the thrill is now making you thirsty, if you want to keep seeing the action, then just drop us a like so you can come back for more. If you're new here, we welcome you with a smile. If you like what you saw, just hit subscribe. We appreciate each and every one of you tuning in to see a key red plot. Join us for the next part. Hope to see you again soon.